it's really cool that you have this unique experience of like, it's like been 2 decades of one
Not
company.
yet, but
oh, okay, almost.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for reminding me.
Sorry. So a very long time at
Yeah.
Microsoft. But I'm curious to know if you ever encountered pressures to pursue entrepreneurship or start your own company. I know that's kind of like a trend now, is like hustle culture. Like you need to have your own company, you need to have all these side hustles along with like your 9 to 5, all of that stuff. So did you ever feel those pressures? At what cost do you feel like this growth and progression came at? So do you feel like you've had to make any sacrifices, whether it was like family, hobbies, extracurriculars, in order to, climb up the ranks and be this successful? Hi everyone, welcome. I'm Tala, and today I'm here with Satish Thomas, who is a corporate vice president for Microsoft Industry Cloud. Satish, how are you?
Good. Thanks, Tal, and looking forward to our chat.
Awesome. So today I'm going to be talking with Satish about his journey from being actually an intern at Microsoft to now a corporate vice president. I was an intern myself last summer, and I'm really excited and interested in learning about that journey and kind of the roadblocks and just everything that it takes to get there. So before we get into all that Microsoft stuff, I want to know about your early life. So tell me a little bit about that.
So you bring back memories now. So I grew up in Botswana, which is a country in southern Africa. So I studied there. I went to university there for my early years doing general engineering. And then I got an opportunity to come study in the US, in Chicago, computer engineering. So I studied computer engineering in college. And then in 2006, I got an internship at Microsoft. And here we are.
So I guess like in these early years and this stage that you're talking about, would you say even before getting that internship, were you always interested in technology, or how did you get into that path of like, getting an internship at Microsoft?
Yeah. So not to age myself, but when I was growing up, the norm was dial-up internet. So I never grew up using the internet much, but one of the first English books I read was The Road Ahead by Bill Gates.
Okay.
And it was just fascinating. I was very fascinated by the potential of technology, the scope of impact. And I remember telling my family back then that one day I'm going to work at Microsoft. Everybody laughed at it a little bit, but here we are with a lot of hard work and luck, as you'd have it.
So did you just like apply and then hope that you would get that interview, and then you did, kind of thing?
Yes, there was actually, I think there's a few Microsoft folks that came to my campus. There was a very long line of campus interviews. I think I probably waited a couple of hours in line, and there's a lot of things that are going through your mind. You're kind of thinking about what questions would come through, et cetera. And that's why I have a lot of empathy now when I interview people in colleges, et cetera, just to make sure people feel very comfortable so they can do their best, give the best answers and just perform as well as they could. So yes, it was a lot of that, the usual process of campus interviews, and then a second set of interviews in Redmond. That was the first time I traveled outside of Illinois.
Oh, so your interviews were actually also in the campus?
In Redmond, yes.
Nice.
So the college interviews were in Chicago, and then the second phase of interviews was in Redmond.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you start at Microsoft as an intern, and then eventually you transition to a full-time employee or a new grad, as you mentioned. So how did you navigate this transition? So was there like certain steps that you took to demonstrate, your value as an intern and like kind of proving that you should come back as a full-time? Yeah.
To be honest, one of the things was during my internship, and I think that's one thing that I was very pleasantly surprised and a little bit intimidated, was as an intern, the work that I did was part of the product. So I started in business applications, Microsoft Dynamics, so that's mission critical enterprise resource planning software and customer relationship management software. So I worked on a feature called the setup and the upgrade capabilities. So the stuff that I worked on during my internship actually shipped. And then when I came back as a full-timer, one of the things that I think worked out very well was I came and joined the same team. So the things I worked on, the people I got to know and the mentors I had, etc., continued on. So I feel like it wasn't too many variables, and that kind of increased my chances to just, learn more. And having the same people around is always helpful.
Yes.
So I feel like the transition from internship to full-time was pretty smooth. But then there's also a few things that I did in terms of like coming to the same team or having the opportunity to come back to the same team, working with a lot of same people that I think that helped a lot with it.
So you had a pretty long journey at Microsoft where you come back as a full-time, but then you stay with the company.
Yeah.
In terms of those promotions or those new opportunities that kind of you came across, like did you come across them? Do you feel like it happened naturally, or how did these opportunities come to you, and how did you demonstrate that you were ready for these higher level roles?
It's a tough one, and I think a lot of us have our own unique journeys. For me personally, I think I benefited a lot of people, mentors, sponsors, and folks that just want to help and see you succeed. So one of the things that I always focused on was doing a great job at the job I had at that point. And with that, people kind of saw what you're able to do, and when an opportunity came up, people think of you, etc. So I feel like organically, I was able to kind of get more scope, move around. I worked in business applications, I worked in marketplaces, in insights, and then most recently industry clouds. But I feel like it's always been organic, and all very, very different experiences. But it's great to be able to do that in the same company, with sometimes the same set of people, and you kind of know the system, so you're able to kind of get to work and deliver the impact without having to work through a lot of those friction points.
So did you like apply for the roles, or did you kind of like kind of word of mouth, or like someone that's on that team saying like, Satish, come work for me, kind of thing?
It's a little bit of both, but I think one of the things that I think that Microsoft does really well is allowing folks to move around within the company, right? So if you look at it, the folks that you work with, sometimes will go into other, will go to other teams, so you might get exposed to something else. So it's always a mix of all of it, a little bit of formal interviewing, a little bit of informal interviewing, but I think getting visibility into those opportunities when they show up, and people saying, what, I think I know a person that might be really good at it, etc. So those kind of things are what actually help me the most versus a formal, let me go figure out something else. But again, like I said, many people's journeys are different, but I've seen both models work well as well. So whatever works for you.
Yeah, I think that like touches on also just the importance of networking and like having that circle and people that will vouch for you based on like how hard you work and all of that.
Yeah.
So I guess at some point you had to start, in order to continue progressing, you had to like start managing teams, becoming a leader. Do you feel like Microsoft sets you up for that progression from like, an individual contributor, you start out as an intern, then a new grad, and you're like maybe a software engineer or a program manager, and you're just doing individual work, and then eventually at some point you're managing others, you're a leader for the company. So how does that progression work, and do you feel like Microsoft sets you up for that?
Yeah. I think, again, this is one of those things where I think it's a lot of personal preference, because some of the most senior folks, you're able to progress in your career whether you're a manager or an individual contributor, right? So I think that's one of those things that I believe is very unique and something we celebrate at the company. That said, just personally, becoming a manager was a very anxious moment for me, because I'm like, oh, before I just had to do my work, now I need to, this thing. But I think the good news is there's just a lot of people that are there to help you with that transition. And just kind of staying grounded on the fact that, the folks on your team, you're there to help them succeed, versus, when you're in IC, it's about what you deliver and how you leverage other folks' work. So like really getting that mindset away from, how do I enable the folks that are on my team to succeed and meet their aspirations, becomes a very important part of a job of a manager, right? And even today, I always tell my team, being a manager is a privilege, and it takes a lot, especially with everything going on, right? It takes a lot, but I think if you're able to kind of stay true to those ethos, I think, and it makes me very, very happy when you see people on the team, grow, in their careers, do great things, whether the company or in the industry. So it was initially, I would say, a very anxious transition, but I think with a lot of help, and of course, I've screwed up many things along the way, but the good news is there's a lot of people that help you along the way and kind of help you succeed in the longer term.
Awesome.
Still working on it, by the way.
So you mentioned you kind of like, screwed up some things along the way. Would you like to talk about any of those, like any obstacles or anything that you've kind of had to overcome in that process?
So many to talk about now, but I think just generally, right? It's all the way from, hey, is there a certain work project that you did that you could have done better, that you could have approached differently, whether it's working with teams, whether it's working on products, or whether it might be just process things. So I think there's a lot of things where, I think it's okay to make many of those, and I think just understanding that the failure or the learnings is a big part of that growth and how you eventually succeed, I think was at least a ethos that I had to adapt and learn. Along the way, and I think none of those, I think that's right. Even from a company perspective, we have this saying that from the transition that we made it from a learn it all to a learn it all versus a know it all. I think that applies a lot as well in terms of it's okay to get a few things off. It's okay to as long as you learn from it. And I think that's where, like I said, there's probably many things that I could have done better, but being able to learn from them, being able, folks basically giving you another chance and all of that good stuff, and you'll get all those opportunities. So as long as you're willing to take those shots and take those opportunities, I think in the longer term, it'll be okay.
Yeah, I think that's a really important trait. It's just like being okay with making mistakes and learning from them is like much better than, being afraid to fail and not even taking the shot in the first place. Like you said, take the shot and see what happens.
Yes.
Awesome. So I guess something that's really interesting that I guess like we kind of just talked about, like the progression of your, you were an intern and then you got a return offer and then you stayed with the company to now a CVP position. So, I feel like it's really cool that you have this unique experience of like, it's like been 2 decades of one
Not
company.
yet, but
oh, okay, almost.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for reminding me.
Sorry. So a very long time at Microsoft. But I'm curious to know if you ever encountered pressures to pursue entrepreneurship or start your own company. I know that's kind of like a trend now, is like hustle culture. Like you need to have your own company, you need to have all these side hustles along with like your 9 to 5, all of that stuff. So did you ever feel those pressures?
I think this is a very personal thing, right? And I think for me personally, I mean, just if you look at our mission as a company, Microsoft's mission is to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more.
You're right.
Now, if that doesn't give you goosebumps, I don't know what does. So at least for me personally, I felt that at Microsoft, it gives me the opportunity to go do things that I think I can uniquely do to make the world a better place, either through technology and other things that we do. So for me, like you said, like I mentioned, I've done many different things at the company. So I don't feel like I've had the same job. I've gotten very different experiences at the same place. So I've never felt the need to be able to go somewhere else to be able to have that kind of impact. So I think that is one thing that I believe is very unique to Microsoft, which is across planet scale infrastructure, be it Azure, low code, no code, and Power Platform, business applications and Dynamics, collaboration in teams, security, this industry. There's just so many things to do, all in the same company. So I feel like I've benefited a lot from that ability to get all those diverse experiences at the same place. So why change anything when you're having so much fun?
Yeah, that's a good statement. So you kind of were like, maybe even like you could call it an entrepreneur, where you made innovations, you had that impact just within bigger company.
Yeah, no, that's actually a good point. So I think to your point, obviously some of those instincts I've always had. And if you look at some of the work that I've gotten the privilege to be part of, like our marketplaces, so Microsoft App Store, so I was one of the first employees on that team.
Okay.
So if you look at industry clouds, I got the privilege to be part of that early set of folks working on what does it mean. And now we have many of these industry cloud efforts across the Microsoft Cloud for healthcare, financial services, sustainability, sovereignty, etc. So even within the company, I think I also have gravitated to new things where Microsoft's trying to figure out new things, etc. So maybe yes, it's a mix of the diversity of things you can work on and the ability to work on new things with the scale of a place like Microsoft. Definitely energizes me a lot. This is my excited face.
Yeah. So I guess in terms of like factors that influenced your decision to continue with Microsoft, it was just that like, a big company, kind of like an endless canvas of, opportunity, and you can switch a lot, you can like innovate within the company, just a lot of opportunity.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think the people, right? I think this is where, I think there's a quote, I forget who exactly said it, but if you do the math, we end up spending more time at work than we end up spending with our families, etc. It's just a math problem.
Yeah.
So at that point, you want to make sure that the work that you do matters. The work that you do, you enjoy the people that you work with, etc. So I think that's where I think I've gotten lucky on both ends, where the people that I've worked with, the people I've worked for, the people who have championed for me have just been good people.
Yes.
Helped me grow, gave me the feedback where I needed to improve things. But I think overall, when you've got those two things going, and I'd say the people have made it very special for me personally at Microsoft, and I keep hearing similar stories from a lot of my colleagues and folks.
I definitely heard that during my internship.
Yeah, and it's something special, and I think those are the things that it's when you have it, you feel it.
Yeah.
And I definitely feel it. So it's a combination of the people and the stuff that we do on behalf of our customers in every region of the world that kind of keeps it exciting and keeps it different almost every day.
Yeah, that's very, very good points. I think the people is really important. Like in my internship at least, like a big reason of why I'm coming back is, the friends I made. I had a really great manager, really great team that I'm actually visiting like this week too.
Yeah.
So yeah, really the people is really big, and I think at Microsoft it's a really big thing.
Yeah.
All right, so we're talking about your impressive like growth and progression within Microsoft, but I have to ask, like, at what cost do you feel like this growth and progression came at? So do you feel like you've had to make any sacrifices, whether it was like family, hobbies, extracurriculars, in order to, climb up the ranks and be this successful?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it sacrifice. I think at various stages, there's different balances that you have in terms of where you spend the time. I definitely play a lot less poker than I used to when I was an intern. But jokes aside, though, I think yes, there's always like that constant thing about where the places that you can spend your time, and I think at least for me, I learned you can't do it all, right? So you need to be very comfortable with like, hey, I'm going to start doing this, and I might stop doing this, right? And I think for me personally, it took a while, to be honest, to get that balance. And I did struggle in the early years, but again, with all the support and kind of nudges, etc., you kind of get into that balance, right? Where you're in the zone where you feel very comfortable with where you're spending your time, why you're spending it, and the purpose behind it. And I think for me personally, I think one of the biggest impacts of what helped me along that journey was my choice of my life partner, my wife, who keeps me very grounded and helps me kind of prioritize and make sure that, along those, how I make those calls, etc. So she's my rock and kind of keeps me honest on those things. And I think now that I have kids, I have more folks to kind of contribute to that journey as well. But it's one of those things, like you just need to spend some time with it. You won't get it all right at the first time. I feel like I'm still working on it. But as long as you've got that support system, the folks that you trust, whoever that might be in your life,
Yeah.
It'll all work out, and you'll find that balance. And there's not always that perfect balance.
Yeah.
But you're always in that zone. But that's been my experience so far.
Yeah, I think there's like that notion of like, especially someone who's climbing up the ranks and is like, kind of higher up, is that you have a lot of like butt kissers, but you need to find those people that will keep you grounded and that'll be honest to you and like tell you the truth and tell you how it is, and that's really important that you have that in your like life partner. So that's really awesome.
And I think it's a good point. Actually, some of my closest friends, even today, are the folks I interned with.
Wow, yeah.
So that would be one, if there's one piece of advice I would leave you with is, I think invest in those relationships, which is, of course, it doesn't come naturally to me as much, but a lot of the folks that I interned with so many years ago are still my friends today. We celebrate our milestones. We celebrate when our kids have milestones. Now, a lot of them have moved out. Some of them are still here, but we've still stayed connected. So those are the things, like, I think, where I've, as I spend more time on this, I value those connections more. So the folks that you've known the longest.
Yeah, because they've known you through everything.
Exactly. And so that's one thing I wish I would have learned earlier, but better better late than never.
Yeah. So you are currently a board of trustee for Plymouth Housing, a local nonprofit focused on eliminating homelessness in Seattle and surrounding areas. So I guess back to kind of our previous conversation about, like sacrifices and stuff like that, it seems like you kind of have it down where you can balance taking part in important initiatives with your job and your ambition and your drive for career growth. So how do you kind of like find that balance?
I'm still finding it, but it's hard. But I think one of the things is, especially in the last few years, I've spent a lot of time thinking about, how do I connect, various parts of my life and the purpose, right, around it all. And I think one of the causes that I feel very strongly about is, the plight of homelessness in some of the cities, especially in Seattle. And as I spend more time talking to people, etc., I came to learn about Plymouth Housing and the work they do, and I got an opportunity to participate in their annual dance gala called Seattle Dances. But ultimately, the goal was, if there's something small that I can do with the platform I have, through the place I work with, the people I know, and the connections I have, why not? For such an important cause. Now, does it take extra effort? Absolutely. Right? But if it does help move the needle for such an important cause, even if it's a small needle, I feel it's a priority well made. But it's again very personal choices, right? There's a lot of folks that I know that have various causes that they're very passionate about. So it's a lot of those friends that inspired me to also find it. So that's one thing where I feel like it's been very rewarding for me personally, just to see some of the small impact that you're able to do with some of these things. And I encourage everybody, don't wait don't wait to give back, or wait to, participate more in your community at some point. So that's one of those things where, I've spent some time saying, hey, if not now, then when? Right? And if it is important, you will find a way. You will find time. So I think that's been the thing. So I'm blessed to be associated with Plymouth and being, playing a small part there through the Board of Trustees work. But really excited about what the charter of the organization. And I hope everybody can find that cause that they're passionate about, because there's much more beyond work.
Yes.
And when you can connect the platform that you have through the work you do, then magic happens. And I feel like that's the part that I've been able to connect with these two. Given Microsoft is a big part of Seattle, and of course that's very close to many of our hearts.
So what advice could you give to me and many others who, just like maybe did an internship or are starting their new grad career? What advice can you give those who are starting their career?
Yeah. It's a tough one. I mean, the first thing is, we're all figuring it out, including myself. But I think the key thing is I'll paraphrase a quote from my favorite athlete, Michael Jordan, which is, I think he said something to the lines of, I've lost 9,000 shots in my career, and lost 300 games. And when he was called upon to make the game-winning shot, he lost it 25 or so times, etc. And the key thing was that he mentioned was, I failed over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeed. So it's always been a quote that has stuck with me, because I was always typically afraid of like trying because I might fail. So my biggest advice is, fundamental and more basic, which is just be kind to yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself. Be kind to others, and take that shot, right? And I think just that shining with that optimism of this future is super, super bright. And we all have an important part to play in it. So take
That's
the shots,
That's
and the future is very bright.
Thank you so much, Satish. We learned a lot today, and I'm sure that many people like me will find a lot of this advice helpful. If you would like to connect with Satish, he's on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I'll have that up on the screen. Thank you, Satish.
Of course. Thanks for taking the time, and I really enjoyed our chat.